Well, good morning, and I'm going to tell you a little story here about the Douglas County road crew and the mysterious stranger. Now, this is not going to be a bitch session. Um, Actually, it's a really good story, so I encourage you to stick with it. Well, this happened earlier this year, and as some of you may know, I've had videos on here of the continuous issues I've had with the Douglas County Commissioners and the road crew. Over the years, they have came on to private property to access the creek bed, to do gravel mining, remove gravel, head cutting upstream, pushing gravel up against the banks, causing more damage to private property, and doing their little endeavors. And if you're interested in looking into some of that, I'll put the links below. It even got worse though. A couple of years ago, when one of the people down here on a highway, uh, some of the property on the opposite side of the bank of me was coming soon to come into the hands of the county. And she had her own ideas of what should be done. And that's kind of how we ended up with the mess I've got today, where what the county did basically blew out my entire drive underneath. So for the last 2.5 years, um, no one has been able to access this property safely. Um, you kind of have to walk down to get to the road. And anyway, back in the back in the spring, the road crew was out here working, and um, one of the road crew members saw the destruction uh, that had happened out here and took it upon himself to take a lot of the gravel that they were getting up out of the creek bed and the sides of the creek and dumping it down into areas um, and in front of the drive to where it looked like, again, it would be accessible. Um, and I could tell right away that it was a tiger trap. It camouflage, if you will. It looked real pretty. It looked real nice. Um, and but I could tell one thing I've always stressed when it comes to the county commissioner's office, and I've even pointed them to the documents, that you never, ever take gravel, loose rock, small rock, and push it up or dump it down any banks along any creeks, any waterways. You can look that up through Department of Natural Resources, Department of Conservation, FEMA. They will all tell you the same thing. Because when you do that, when the water comes again, what it will do, it'll grab a hold of that loose rock and it will pull it down and it will bring more ground down with it. So it's not a practice that should be done at all. But anyway, that was done and it looked really nice and I could tell what was going to happen. And sure enough, a few weeks later, it rained and it just brought everything down and more ground down with it. And so the front, it is dug out to, I mean, it's difficult to even walk across it. It's a little dangerous. Um, so I called the county commissioner's office, uh, spoke to Mr. Lovelace, which is for my district, And I told him what had happened, and he goes, "Oh, yes, I'm aware of that." He told me that he was uh, trying to help you guys out, and I told him not to be doing that. And I was like, "Well, I'm sure he had the best intentions in the world, but this is what's happened, and regardless, um, it makes it really difficult and dangerous to get across. So next time your road crew's out here, could you please um, take the time? I know it's private property, but it's interesting that that's a two-way street. They'll come onto private property to do damage, but they don't want to come onto private property to make it right." But anyway, I said, I understand it's private property, but if you got, one of your guys could come out here and at least put some rock up front so it's a little bit more accessible, because there's the Oats bus, which is public transportation, that comes here once a week. David, which lives on the other side of this property, he's in his 70s, and he rides that Oats bus once a week into town. And I told him it was dangerous for the Oats bus, and it's dangerous for him to go across. And I'm one little gal with a shovel, and that would be quite a job for me to do by hand. And he understood, and I told him thank you, and that was the end of our conversation. Well, needless to say, here months later, has anybody ever put a rock down in front? No. So, Mr. Lovelace, you're a lying sack of shit, and nobody should give you their vote in the future. But as the individual that was with the road crew that did this, I want to thank you. And I mean that sincerely, because you are the only one in over 2 years that saw a bad situation and tried to do something about it and took it upon yourself to try to do something. It didn't turn out well, but you tried to do something. And that's more than I can say about 99.9% of the people in this county, because people just don't give a shit. And that's sad to say, but it's people like you that still give me hope that there's good people out there that will take it upon themselves to try to make things right. And there should be more people like you. Your name was not divulged to me in my conversation with the commissioner's office, so I don't know who you are. But if there's anybody there that knows who this individual is, you can tell them thank you from me, because I appreciate people like you. So that's the end of my story, and I hope y'all have a good week ahead.